When done well, supernatural stories really are some of the very best that horror has to offer. Ghost stories, paranormal, supernatural, those were always at the heart of what unsettled me the most growing up into my adult years. Part of it's because I grew up in a spiritually adjacent house. So exploring these themes, these beliefs, different things like that, that was always super intriguing to me and super vivid for me even into my adult years where I remember the early wave of paranormal horror that dominated the straight to video market, red box horror, all of that. I've spent many a night combing the depths of Redbox for the next taking of, the next haunting of, knowing full well that most of them had pretty solidly exactly the same plot, beat for beat. And while paranormal horror has had its day in the sun, it is in desperate need of a refresh. The reality is, most supernatural horror is going to reflect the Judeo Christian approach to ghost stories, to demon stories, especially on the big screen. And there's only so much that you can do with that. And as somebody who has walked in the shoes of an investigator and have found the thing that goes bump in the night, there's so much nuance that can be pulled from telling these kinds of stories that the market is wide open for. So when stories come out that really seek to do something different and accomplish that, we need to talk about them. Last year, this movie came out, It Lives Inside, and this thing was a festival darling. It did really well at South by Southwest, and production company Neon brought it to the big screen for widespread release. And the story is entirely told from the Indian perspective. It is told through the lens of it being an Indian horror movie first and foremost. And it is such a breath of fresh air because it plays it as straight as the Judeo Christian storytelling framework has been told for the last, I don't know, 20 years. And one of its biggest strengths is it plays it completely straight to this being the framework, this being the spiritual dynamic, and it's all the better for it because with other cultures' spiritual storytelling, there tends to be a lot more emphasis put on individual dynamics of a person's experience. So it could be centered around a specific emotion, a specific action, a specific time of life, where it invites a lot more dimension to the story that this straightforward good versus evil, good is likely going to triumph in the end sort of approach doesn't necessarily have that. It's more bombastic. And that's why movies like The Exorcist live on in infamy because it was bombastic, because it was guttural for its time. Whereas something like It Lives Inside explores character storytelling in a degree that I haven't seen out of horror in a minute, especially paranormal horror. And this is the cycle that I can point to for the entire time that I've been a fan of horror. Something strikes really hot, it gets drug into the ground, somebody comes along and revitalizes it. For me, I kind of got into the slasher craze when it was about three quarters of the way through its life cycle, and Wes Craven was reinventing what the slasher meant with Scream. With paranormal, I've been able to see pretty much the entire life cycle of the modern supernatural horror flick. And so to see horror be this welcoming home for this fledgling writer, director, producer to come in and tell his story the way he wants to tell his story, and to be able to give a home for actors to be able to come in and express themselves in this way and tell a story about their culture is exactly what I love about the medium of horror movies, because they have the ability to be able to be cheaper, more easily made, and when done well, are this open door to human experience. And right from the beginning of this movie, we are first and foremost watching a family struggling with adapting to a new culture. We're watching a family in transition, first and foremost, in this movie. And it doesn't shy away from the tension that exists between mother and daughter. Primarily, there is some conflict with dad, but it is centered mainly on the younger generation wanting to adapt the culture of America, and her parents still very rooted in the cultures and customs of where they're from. And it's unapologetic for that to be the backdrop that then the subtext can get poured into, because the whole time we are exploring what it means to be connected, what it means to have family, what it means to embrace your culture, to feel like an outsider, to feel like you're alone, to question people's motives, and to wrestle with deep sadness or depression or loneliness by way of our main character, Sam. Sam is struggling with wanting to feel included and wanting to feel like she belongs, and thus pushing away her old friends, the ways and cultures and traditions of her family. And the whole time, the expression of the emotion is played out by way of essentially a creature feature.
It's called the Pishash.
And everything that happens within the movie reflects the culture in a way that is just straightforward. So you have a collection of families who have moved to America from India. One of the families is found dead in their home, and one of Sam's friends that she has since pushed away because she's trying to fit in shows up, is acting really weird, and has this jar. And
There's something in here. You can't see it. But it lives inside.
reaches out for help. Sam denies her, breaks the jar, and the main crux of the film starts to take place, where Tamira gets abducted by this entity, and we watch Sam wrestling with this whole thing. She's trying to reach out to people, and the creature is separating her from anybody that would care about her, because that's where it thrives off of. And the whole while, Sam is being forced to come face to face with her culture, reach out to her mom, and find out what is happening, because it turns out one of the stories that they heard as kids turns out it's true.
To tenderize the soul by attacking your sanity, isolating you from those who love you. And if anyone tries to help you, it will hurt them.
And it's happening. And there's this generational team up that takes place, which leads her to reconciling with her friend, and with the help of her friend, get to a largely incomplete conclusion, because this thing is a force of nature. This thing is a spiritual entity. It's not just done and dusted inside the context of what happened here. And I love the way it leaves us largely on a cliffhanger that doesn't even suggest that there's going to be another one. I don't know as though there necessarily needs to be another one. I think there's room to do it well and not completely and totally neglect what happened in the first one. But this first one is a story. This one is its own standalone character arc, story arc, and just all around good ghost story from a different culture, which I would strongly suggest for anybody who's looking for something in the paranormal horror genre or is just simply looking for something that isn't overly gruesome. There is some stuff, but it's definitely not a slasher movie. It builds its tension elsewhere. But that's it. That's all. That's a wrap. For now, go ahead, drop a comment below. Let me know what you're watching this spooky season, what you want to hear me talk about. While you're there, go ahead and hit subscribe, tick that bell, so that way you do not miss any more spooky content to come. But until next time, peace.